Hello, Elliot here, otherwise known as Limbo Days, and today I'm going to be showing you a mix session of a song called Love's Out the Door. And this was a song I recorded in Wales with my friend Ben, just me and him. He's playing drums on this actually. And we recorded the session there. I took it back home to mix it, and this is the session. And hopefully, you get something from this. And basically, I'm going to run through the session, run through what plugins I'm using on certain things, and hopefully you can get some ideas from this. Maybe you can suggest some ideas for me, but I'm just going to explain to you my process of how I got the track to sound as it does. So let's have a listen. So let's have a listen. So let's start off with the drums, shall we? And we can have a look here. So kick wise, I tend to like using this Kramer emulation. I think it's like a Kramer preamp emulation. Something they used to use in the 60s or 70s, as in the real thing. And I tend to just boost at 60 there, something I got from Andrew Sheps a while ago. And that just adds a nice bit of thickness to the kick drum. And I tend to use that on pretty much all my kick drums now. So we can have a on and off of that. Let's have a look. I'll solo this. So as you can hear, it just kind of gives it a bit more thump, a bit more roundness, a bit more warmth. And I'll usually have a Sheps 73 preamp on as well, based off the Neve 1073, I'm pretty sure. And I'm usually adding some EQ there with that, and also using maybe the preamp side of it. I'm not really using it there, but on the snare, I'm pushing it a little bit. So I tend to use that on my kick and snare usually. I've also got the DBX on kick and snare. They tend to be my go-to compressors for kick and snare, just with its fast attack. And I tend to like compressors where you don't have to mess around with the attack and release times. So this ticks that box for me. And you can see I've kind of blended it in with the mix as well. So that's what's going on with my kick and snare. Not too much going on with my drum bus. I've got an SSL compressor on it just to glue everything together a little bit. Everything else is pretty basic. Just a bit of EQ maybe. Sending it to a room reverb. I'm also sending the kick and snare to a parallel compressor. Let's have a look what I am doing on that. So this is a bit random. I'm usually doing it a bit differently, this. But I've got a gate on it. I've got some EQ, maybe so it's not picking up any rumble or subs. And then I'm also hitting that through a compressor and then EQing it. The snare one, I'm pushing it a bit more. The 76, bit of an exciter, a bit of EQ as well. I can't tell you exactly why I did that, but I have. So let's go over to the bass. Let's have a listen to that. So, got the FabFilter Pro Q even on. I've got that pretty much on all my channels. It's just the easiest EQ to use in my opinion. You've also got an auto gain option on it, which is super helpful. So say if you're adjusting parameters on it, it will compensate the level. So you can bypass what you've just done and hear the difference of what is actually being done to it. Because obviously when something's louder, you tend to favor that. So that sorts that problem out. So that's cool. I've also got a 3A on there. I'll usually use a 2A or a 3A on my basses for compression. Just tend to find they kind of round it out quite nice. Got the R bass on, which I'm using most of the time on my basses. That just adds a kind of accents that frequency. I don't know if it's with harmonics or what, but you can hear how much of a difference that makes. So if I turn it on and off. So yeah, lots of warmth, lots of body and cushion added to that. I've also got, I think I'm doing some EQ on that. And the max bass I tend to use on my bass almost all the time. And that just adds harmonics to it in the higher register. So you'll probably notice the difference in the twang when I turn this on and off. So yeah, that's that. Bit more EQ at the end. Let's move on to guitars. So guitars, I'm tending. So let's move over to guitars. I'm tending to use a LA3A on my guitars for the compressor. Again, it's got no attack and release options on it, which is less faff for me. I also like the kind of harmonics it adds to the guitars as well. So, let's turn this on and off. So it's not even doing that much. I'm usually just hitting them slightly on my compressors, and then I might add another compressor further down the line instead of just using one that might hit it hard. So that's what's going on with that. I'm also using the Pugtech EQ on. I'm also using the Pugtech EQ on my rhythm guitar. Well, most guitars to be fair, and the MEQ5, it just handles pretty much all of the mid range. So I'm like boosting a bit of 1,000 there, and a bit of 1.5 kilohertz, that is. So that's what I tend to use in my guitars. I've also got a bit of the decapitator on it. So this is a plug-in chain that I bought a couple of years or so ago now, and it's by Sound Toys, and it's pretty much just got everything you'd need on it. So it's got like the decapitator, Devil Arc, you've got the Echo Boy on there, which I tend to use for a lot of my delays if it loads. But the decapitator I've started to use pretty much at the end of the signal chain on most of my stuff at the moment, and that just adds a bit of warmth to everything and some harmonics to make it glue in the track a bit more. So let's hear on the rhythm guitar if I turn this on and off. Put it in context. So it is adding a bit of gain to it, to be fair, but generally it's the harmonics that make it. So what I'll usually do with this is click around on the different styles, which are basically based off different consoles, I'm pretty sure, and find a tone that works, drive it a little bit, and then usually play around with the mix knob to get it sounding as dry or wet as I want it, and then adjust the output to get it sit right in the track. And that's essentially what I'm doing there. The Devil Lock as well, I tend to like blasting drums through that, so I might have that on the bus or I might have that on the actual channel, and it just crunches everything really nice. And there's also a mix knob on there. Yeah, that is that. What else can we look at? The C4, mostly using that to capture some of the body of the guitar, so that's not taking over the track too much. I tend to find with guitars they can usually sound quite muddy, so using a multi-band compressor just kind of sorts that out quite nicely. So you can probably hear the difference here. Let's turn it off. Yeah, so it just sits under a bit nicer. What else could we look at, eh? Piano, my piano chain's usually quite random and dependent on the song, so I don't think that's really worth going through. Let's look at the lead vocals. So let's have a listen to them.
If everything felt like before, I think I'd be drowning in love once more. That's for sure.
So as you can see, I've automated it there as well. That's something I always do once I've mixed it, and that just makes the performance a bit more dynamic, especially after you've been crushing it with a compressor. So I always recommend doing that. I'm touching it with the RVox, so just to compress it a little bit. I put a gate on there as well, so I'm not capturing any of what's going on in the background of the recording. I'm not, say, compressing that and making that more prominent. So that's usually on my vocal chain. Bit of EQ, the Pro Q, Poo Child. I've used the Poo Child quite a lot on this mix because it makes everything a bit warmer. It's one of those vintage sounding compressors that Al Green used to use, the Beatles. So for this kind of style of track, just works. Or when you want to thicken something up, I'll just send it to that. So sometimes I'm using that on my mix bus now, literally not even compressing anything. I've just got it on, and it just adds a nice bit of warmth. So I've got that on. Bit of Poohtech EQ. I've got 76 on, so I'll usually use an LA76 based off the 1076 compressor on pretty much all my vocals. I've actually played around with the attack and release on this, but that's good for tone, good for capturing transients usually. So that is on there. I've also got the Aphex Vintage Exciter on. I think it's by Waves. Yeah, Waves. And what that essentially does is it adds some higher frequencies. So it just makes everything a bit more crisp, basically. And that's, I'm pretty sure it's artificial as well, so it's not utilizing necessarily what's already in the recording, it's adding it itself, bit like the Max Bass does for the bass. So that's what's going on there. I've also got some multi-band compression going on as well, something I've started doing recently. A lot of the higher end producers tend to use it, and basically because vocals have so many different things going on frequency wise, it's good to capture those certain ranges and even out the performance that way, as opposed to just through one compressor capturing all the frequencies. So I'll show you what this is doing actually.
If everything felt like before, I think I'd be drowning in love once more.
So yeah, it's basically just capturing the higher frequencies, say like 1K to 8K, 10K maybe roughly. And let's turn it off. We'll see what it sounds like.
If everything felt like before, if everything felt like before.
Yes, it's basically capturing where the sibilance and sharpness is from vocals and making sure that isn't too piercing, and it kind of keeps it sitting under the instruments a bit nicer. Not that you want vocals necessarily sitting under the instruments, but I just find it evens everything out a bit better. So that's what's going on there. Bus wise, usually have everything going to the same room, which at the moment is a Valhalla EQ. Yeah, just something nice and easy there. I've got a left and right room. Say if the guitar is on one side, I might send it to the room on the other side, just for a bit of spatial depth or whatever you'd call it. Bit of width. What else? We've got some slapback usually on the vocals. I think that's coming from an Echo Boy at the moment. I might be wrong though. Let's have a look. Yeah. Bit of Echo Boy. So I usually use a flange or chorus on vocals as well, just to add a bit more of a stereo image. So I'll usually use either the chorus or the flanger. For this I've gone with the flanger. So let's see if we can hear the difference on and off.
If everything felt like before, if everything felt like before.
So it just sounds a bit thicker, a bit bigger. I'm also sending that to a parallel compression and like a parallel EQ as well, just for a bit more bite. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Can have a look at the mix bus as well. Where's that? So on the mix bus on this one, this is generally the same on most of my mixes. I'm always updating it. So say like on newer mixes, this is slightly different. I've usually got this Q10 on, which is pretty much the same on every mix in terms of its settings. And I'm mixing into this as well. I've got the SSL compressor, just catching it a little bit.
If everything felt like before.
So that's what's going on there. So I'll usually have a tape emulation plugin as well. So I've got this J37 on here, which is what I used to use in Abbey Road. You've got different formulas as well, just for different tones. So I'll play around with them, a bit of saturation. And I'll either use that or I will use the Kramer tape plugin, which is this bad boy. And it's usually just adding some nice harmonics, a bit of warmth, and just gluing all the instruments together a bit nicer. So that's what's going on there. I've got the Oxford Inflator at the moment, just plowing through. So I've got it on a setting that Chad Blake uses, who mixed all of Arctic stuff. And he basically just smashes this thing, and it just adds loads of warmth and roundness. Pretty sure it kind of adds saturation as well. But that's, yeah, it's pretty juicy. It can be too much sometimes, but I've mixed into it, so it's not too bad. I've also got a limiter on at the moment, the Pro L, so FabFilters limiter, and that adds a bit of tone, and then it's also to make sure nothing clips on the way out for when it gets sent to mastering. So you could have a listen on and off. Let's have a look.
If everything felt like before, I think I'd be drowning in love once more. That's for sure. Maybe one day I'll feel the same, but I just don't feel that way anymore. Now that love's out the door, and you don't want me anymore.
So yeah, that is pretty much everything. So I hope you've got something from this. This is generally what I use most of the time. It's always changing. So if you have any suggestions of some new plugins I could try out, some other ways to use what I'm using at the moment, or for certain instruments that things you like using on them, that would be cool to know. And if you found this video helpful, let me know, and I'll try and make some more. But hopefully you enjoyed. Have a good day. I'll see you soon.